I was worried that Enola Holmes 2 would be a victim of the first film's success. I also didn't expect it to well up at one point towards the end, which I will explain with a spoiler warning towards the end of this discussion. This film surprised me in so many ways. The first way it surprised me is that it is probably almost as good as the first film. And I say that as a surprise because I thought the first film was phenomenal. I watched it because Helena Bonham Carter's in it. She's one of the greatest loves of my life. She was barely in the first film. Let's face it, she was barely in this film as well. But despite that, there are so many things about the first film I loved. And all of the things I loved about the first film, pretty much, were retained here. Enola as a character, the way Millie Bobby Brown brings her to life, the way the film is edited, the way it expertly combines drama and comedy, it's so effectively done. The one thing that I didn't think was quite as strong was the narrative, up until all of the threads began to be tied together with the mystery being solved. And again, I will discuss that with a spoiler warning. This film was released this year, of course, 2022, directed by Harry Bradbeer, starring Millie Bobby Brown as the fabulous Enola, who I think is such an amazing character. Really, truly adore her. We also have Henry Cavill as Sherlock, who is in it less than I'd expected, but a decent amount. HBC does, of course, appear as Eudoria, and she has some pretty decent scenes, but my favourites, just coincidentally, are her first and her last. I absolutely love those. Following on from the first film, it does recap a little bit, but not extensively so that if you've perhaps watched them back to back, you feel like you're just dragging your heels. It recaps enough that you have enough information to follow this narrative if, for some reason, you're watching it without having seen the first film. But obviously I recommend the first film. Enola has now decided to open a detective agency, and she has taken on a case when this young girl called Bessie approaches her and says that her sister has gone missing. And the first thing that I want to do is point out how brilliant Bessie is as a character. She's played by Sarana Su-Ling Bliss, and she is amazing, fantastically acted, really entertaining character, really engaging, great range of emotions. And Enola takes on this case to try and find out what has happened to her sister Sarah. And I will be honest, while I feel like clues were given at a steady rate, we were given chance as the viewer to try and decipher these clues before Enola was able to put the pieces together. Everything about it worked well insofar as how it was adapted, how frequently we were given clues, how many clues there were, but I just didn't find it that engaging. I never at any point found myself emotionally invested in what happened to Sarah or where she was. I was invested in Enola being able to solve this. I really wanted her to be able to work this out, but I wasn't too bothered about the outcome, whereas with the first one I was actually a lot more emotionally invested in the narrative. So it's not that the narrative was bad. I think it's a great idea that's very well executed. Just compared to the rest of the film, the editing is some of the best I've ever seen. The acting is some of the best I've ever seen. The narrative is not one of the best. So compared to the other amazing things about this film, for me the narrative felt second-rate, but it's still decent. Again, maybe it's a victim of the first film's success because that narrative I did think was fabulous and very refreshing. The costumes were amazing, the scenery, set designs, locations, everything's absolutely breathtaking. Really adored it, almost as much as the first film, but not quite. But it's great to see Enola coming into her own now that we know more about the character. So I guess the spoiler now, I'm going to divulge what happens at the end, so please don't listen to me anymore if you haven't seen the film. Please do check it out. But the message here that Eudoria delivers to Enola is that yes, you can be a powerful, strong, independent woman, but even in a world where men dominate, but you are even stronger if you find your allies and you stand together and use your voice as a group rather than as an individual. And Enola finally realizes this, and the fantastic scene gave me chills when they were in the match factory and she began stomping and the girls all started following, and it was just chilling, and it was so emotional and so moving. And when they walk out and then you see along the Thames, and it's just, It was stunningly shot, so emotive, so powerful, and so moving, and I feel like the entire two films had been leading up to that moment where Enola could lead a kind of mini revolution, if you like, and that she, as a strong individual, was able to bring together the power of everybody else and lead them in this powerful stance, and I just thought it was sensational. Really adored the film. As I said, some of the best acting I've ever seen, some of the best editing and directing and costumes. The costumes were exquisite. I absolutely love them. The soundtrack was very effective and sometimes surprising. Not all of the songs were what I was expecting, and I really adored it. If you've seen the first film and you haven't seen this, definitely give it a watch. I think you'll love it. And if you haven't seen the first film yet, check it out. Enola is one incredible character.